This week's Coach of the Week, sponsored by Lasso Work Cedar, goes to second grade Huskies coach Guy Minix. In the fourth quarter, Guy showed great sportsmanship when he called a timeout and devised a plan with the opposing coach to make sure that one of their kids got an opportunity to shoot the basketball. Guy, great work, great sportsmanship. You are the model of a coach that we are looking for. You are this week's Coach of the Week, sponsored by Lasso Work Cedar.
Hey guys, this week's Player of the Week is Jackson Hooper with the 5th and 6th grade Hurricanes. Jackson, great game this week. Some notes that your coach said about you. What a spark plug to our offense he is. What a spark plug for our team. He's a leader, he's tough, and he brings the intensity every week. Jackson, great job, and for your efforts, you are this week's LC Player of the Week.
All right, welcome to episode I've Lost Count with Winning It with the Home Team. Today we have a special guest, someone that I look up to, someone that has held my position before I got it as recreation pastor, someone that has set the stage for the LC's success and for the recreation ministry's success. And that man is Tommy Foster. Tommy, thanks for being here.
Thanks for inviting me, and I'm not sure about that introduction. There was a lot of trial and error there, but you've done a great job of picking up that, baton and keep running with it. So I'm excited about being here.
Yeah, well, thank you. Well, Tommy is married to Gretchen. Tommy is all sports. He's currently our children's pastor at Lake Church, but his background is full of youth sports, junior high sports, high school sports, some club sports mixed in there. Tommy, you've played high school football, baseball, college baseball. You've coached varsity football and baseball at the UIL 4A and 3A level. And you're currently the assistant coach at Grace Prep, which is a Division I 3 TAPS school. So go Lions.
Well, I mean, you're right. Sports was a big part of my life, but be honest with you, acceptance and approval was really my motivation. I didn't know that when I was younger. I grew up in a home with an abusive father. I found any way that I could get out of the house. And when I was young, growing up in Arlington, went to Deaf Elementary, Bailey Junior High, Arlington High. Anytime they passed out something at school, whether it was YMCA basketball or Optimus football or Little League baseball or Arlington Soccer Association, I would bring that home, right? Ride my bike home, give it to my mom. Yeah. My mom would write a check. And so a lot of my beginning stages in sports was just to not be at home. And then as I played more and more, I got positive feedback. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of where I was searching for that, early on. Just wanted to be a part of those opportunities and also just not be around things that were tense at home.
Right? Yeah.
So.
Well, you've got 3 kids. You and Gretchen have successfully raised 3 kids and are continuing to.
Yeah. Yes.
Tell us a little bit about them.
Yeah, 3 adult children. Certainly not completely done yet. We still got a lot of that. So, yeah. So, for Gretchen and I, we wanted our kids to be, right, this is the term, well-rounded, right? Mm-hmm. And so we were asking a lot of couples our age, when the kids were young coming along, what are y'all doing? And there's a million opportunities, way more opportunities when I was growing up. And sports was one of those opportunities. But, we always heard people talk about, basically the 3 A's, right? You can put, you want to focus on academics, you want to focus on athletics, but you also don't want to forget about the arts, right? So it's good for them to be involved in playing an instrument, orchestra, band, or whatever. Yeah. So
well-rounded.
Well-rounded.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, they were playing instruments in young, and part of that well-roundedness was the spiritual part of it too, right? So we wanted them to be in church.
Yeah.
And we wanted them not just be at church, right? But we wanted them to be involved. And so, we were putting them in lots of different activities early on.
Yeah. I'm listening to what you're saying, and I'm comparing myself to, my childhood and how that played out. And I got the academics and I got the athletics. I dropped the art piece And
There's an
I
art
think,
piece?
Yeah.
That's how I was raised too.
Yeah.
Like my parents
Yeah.
were not into the arts at all.
But
yeah.
I think like I gravitated toward the athletic side, and like you're saying, there's some similarities there because I got that positive reinforcement, and I just kept digging in further and further and further, and I think it ends up causing problems later in life.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that?
Absolutely, because by the time I got into like 7th, 8th grade, right, you have all these other messages coming at you, all these other, narratives about life. And so because my identity was in acceptance and approval, which
Yeah.
again, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But that's where my identity was. Then I started to kind of figure out, well, what does that do really for me?
Right.
And that was when, I got involved here at this church. My parents, really my mom brought us here in 7th grade.
Yeah.
And then I started being introduced to new concepts and ideas about identity, which eventually became identity in Christ. That took time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, both of you are probably like me, as I would have people say, wow, you're really good at that sport. Right. And I'm thinking, well, it's not because I'm necessarily good at it. It's because, there's other things that I'm trying to avoid.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, I was first to practice.
Sure.
Yeah, I would stay after.
Absolutely.
Because that meant that I didn't have to deal with things at home, and that wasn't healthy.
Right. Well, and I can end this podcast right now because it brings it back to, our theme, which is focus, right? Like pressing on with focus. And so we have to just somehow as children figure out how to focus or refocus on how do we become well-rounded. And so then that brings the parents into it, and the parents have to help with that responsibility. So there's the answer. We're done.
Yeah.
We can walk away today.
For sure, we're done pretty much. And I think it's very important for us to remember that, our kids are only looking what's directly in front of them,
Absolutely.
right? Like if they are only if they want to continue a sport based on the approval and the acceptance part of it, as parents, we have to take a step back and say, okay, well, that's good, but that's not like the whole picture, right?
Right.
And so as we talk about focus, as we're on this episode of Focus, as parents, we can get caught up in the wins and losses or making sure that our kid is on the right team or they're playing the right sport. Like, for instance, I'm not perfect. Like, for instance, I would like Taya to play soccer. Okay, this is an honest confession right here. I would like Taya to play soccer. She's good at it. And then maybe some gymnastics, right? Develop that footwork at an early age. And then, if I had it my way, I would want her then to go either play basketball or volleyball, right? So to get that footwork down and then go and play basketball.
That's plan A. You're calling that plan A.
That's plan A, yeah. And so really this podcast is preaching to me, as we talk about this, because I can couch it in a way that, well, I want the best for her. So I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, right?
Yeah.
So I'm totally at fault here.
Yeah.
But I have to ask my question, like, is it for her benefit or is it for my benefit?
Yeah.
Is it for the benefit of the family, which is what this podcast is all about, like winning it with the home team.
Right.
If we're serious about winning it with the home team, then I think as parents, Katrina, mom, Dean and dad, we have to take ownership of what's best.
Yeah.
Not athletically, right? Not, just academically or in the arts, but looking at what you guys have already said, which is a well-rounded picture.
Yeah.
So I guess some questions that I have is as we're looking out, for our kids' best interests and we're wanting the home team to win, can you obtain both? Like, and by that I mean, like, can you let your kid play all of the sports and still get that quality time, that you desire as a family? Maybe we'll answer that question. But I think it depends on your focus. So bringing it back to focus. So Tommy, question for you. As you and Gretchen were living out your youth sports era, did you direct your kids in a certain direction? Like I'm wanting to direct Taya, in the things that I just mentioned. Did you have those conversations? Were you worried about what team they were going to play on, and then how that would benefit them?
It's different today. I think, even though my kids are 24, 22, and 20, and our youngest just graduated high school from Martin a year and a half ago, I think things are changing fast for parents. I know for us, sports was just one outlet of how we wanted them to be involved in things. And so for us to put our kids in Little League, right, it really wasn't about what team they were on. It really wasn't about who they were playing with. It really wasn't about those things. It was just to go and enjoy the game and have fun.
Yeah.
And so we didn't put our kids in select or club sports until after they were at, basically 9th and 10th grade.
Okay.
And so, basketball, we did upward, and we coached. We wanted to coach. I coached all three of our kids. Gretchen coached, all right, seeing Gretchen out there at upward basketball with Taylor, up and down this. I mean, those were things that created a lot of really special moments with our kids.
Yeah.
Being in that team picture when their T-ball was, we look back at those pictures now, and it really wasn't about whose team they were on, right? Yeah. It was about just being with them.
Right.
And then of course, just, as they got older into 5th, 6th, 7th grade and things got a little more intense, we had to kind of give that away.
Right.
Yeah.
So when they went to young junior high, I couldn't be their coach anymore.
Right.
But we were right there in the stands supporting them, and we didn't get to pick who they played with in junior high, much less high school.
Right.
So early on, it was just about giving them opportunities.
Yeah.
Putting them in places where we were a part of the community. We were, when we were in the stands in junior high, high school, we were a part of the community, and that was a big deal. So I don't know that we ever, and I know people who do this. I mean, they will hand select who their kids play with, but for us, YMCA basketball, Arlington Optimist soccer, Optimist football, Little League baseball, that was where the community was.
So, and I'm going to follow up with that, because when we were kids, it feels like you went from one sport to the next depending on the season, right? So you played football in football season, baseball, basketball, and it's not like that anymore. It seems like every sport is year round. And one of the things that we have even kicked around on this podcast previously is now it seems like nothing's sacred. There is games on Sundays, tournaments on Sundays. We didn't have that. We played on Saturdays, and Sundays were off days. So for families struggling with that at home and here, with boys that are still playing it, at a fairly high level, and they're playing on Sundays, what's your advice to those families today? As someone who, because you're heavily involved in kids ministry and that, so what would you think?
The mass population is probably not going to like my response, but we did not do select or club, but our kids did make all-star teams, right? So once they made all-star teams, then they started doing tournaments on weekends. Right. So I'll give you an example, Tommy being our oldest, so our first time through, made the 10-year-old all-star team, right? Which at first I was like, they're 10, but you really have an all-star team.
Right.
I mean, I understand one all-star game maybe. But no, I mean, it was Little League, right? So they just kept advancing, and they won the state. Then they went to Southwest Regionals, and if they had won with Southwest Regionals, they'd have gone to the 10-year-old Little League World Series.
And you're heavily invested in this. Like, you're involved.
Well, it is, and you're excited for them, but at times you're thinking, this is way too much. Right? Because now if you ask Tommy about it, he'll be, most of only what he can remember is what what pictures he's seen.
Yeah.
But dive into that statement that you just made. That's way too much. Because one of the questions that I had, and this goes to what you're about to say, I think, is you talked about how culture has changed. You guys signed up for fun, and to enjoy the sport. And now, you mentioned this is way too much. Define way too much, and why is it way too much? Because I think for parents, we just go in because our kid is winning and we want to advance and they're excited. But I think that there's a deeper issue in there that if parents would just step back for a second, and look at, if you think this is too much, like let's get into that. Why is it too much at 10 years old?
Yeah. So one of the things that I learned early on and we passed on is the scoreboard lies, right? Scoreboard says you're a loser. Really? Piece of metal?
Yeah.
Right? LED lights. And so to watch these children fall apart emotionally.
Yes.
as if their favorite pet just
Yes.
got run over,
Yes.
you know,
Yeah.
because the scoreboard says that you know, have less runs or less points.
Yes.
Right.
Really didn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
And so,
And we see that every Saturday.
Every Saturday.
Every single Saturday. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you know, I don't know that my kids ever cried like that because they got a C in math.
Exactly.
You know?
Right.
I don't even know that I've seen them cry like that, you know, when their brother or sister got hurt on the playground.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so to me, I mean, even coaching at the high school level, right? I would tell them, we don't care about the scoreboard, right?
Yeah.
Now, that was taught at an early age.
Yeah.
So while some kids were falling apart, you know, my kids are kind of looking over me awkwardly, like, should I be sadder?
Right.
And we would talk in the car. You know, we would talk in the car because ultimately it's a game.
Right.
Yeah.
It is a game.
Yeah.
And it's meant to be played, right? You know, we always talked about don't make it more than a game, don't make it less than a game.
Right.
Right? Don't make it to where you don't care about your teammates and you don't care about,
That's
you
good.
know, the coach and you don't care
Yeah.
about doing your best.
Right.
Right? But also don't make it so much, right, that, you know, basically you're burned out by the time you're 16, 17.
Yeah.
Right.
And
And it ruins your entire weekend because you lost the tournament.
Yeah.
absolutely.
Or you didn't have a
Yeah.
good at bat.
For sure.
You know?
Yeah, because we all know that you know, those rings and those jerseys and those trophies. I mean, again, my kid's 24, 22, and 20 now. Guess where those things are?
Yeah.
In a box,
Yeah.
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And every once in a while they pull it out from under the bed and look at it.
Yeah.
when
Mine
they-
are back in North Carolina.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
In the closet.
Well, when they started giving away rings in tournaments, I mean,
Yeah.
it was really weird that they were, you know,
Yeah.
Got to keep up with the NBA.
Yeah.
Professional sports.
Right.
That's all that it is.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, just helping them understand that ultimately it's a game. And you know, we would talk about, okay, 3 things about, you know, playing sports. Number 1, we want to do our best, not be the best, right?
That's good.
What does that look like for you to be your best?
Yeah.
Right. Number 2 was have fun. It's a game again. I mean, the kids that you see out there that look like they're playing in the backyard, but when they're on the field,
Yeah.
they usually play the best.
Right.
Right. I've seen lots of kids, and I'm old enough now to have seen kids play with my kids that are now
Yeah.
playing in high levels. And those kids played like they were playing in the backyard or at the
Yeah.
park.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they played loose and fun.
Yeah.
Right.
And
With a smile on their face.
smile on their face
Yeah.
and competed at a high level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And I think remembering those things going into each game, and then afterwards, it cannot be all about their failures. It cannot be all about the mistakes.
Yeah.
Right. It cannot be all about, you know, I taught you better.
Yeah.
And
And we see that every Saturday too. Yeah. I mean, it just happens. It does. I mean, you're describing when you're asking the questions, you know, parts of all of our childhood. I mean, because, you know, my dad was the same way. He wanted the best for me, but he got caught up in it too. And I fed off of that, and it's just cyclical. And before you know it, I carried that stuff with me into adulthood, where now all of a sudden I have a career and I want to be the best at that. And so I'm chasing awards and I'm chasing all kinds of stuff. And it is just slowly chipping away at who I am, and I don't even realize it.
Yeah.
And so all of that stuff early on plays a big role later.
Yeah, I think, you know, we can talk about youth sports, but what it comes down to really is I mean, this is a problem for all of us because like you were saying, you know, the things that people tell us that we're good at, like the approval and the acceptance, it just bleeds over into adulthood.
Yeah.
Right. I remember where I was when I first started playing basketball. Like when I first was like, okay, like this is gonna be a thing for me. Like this is gonna be a hobby. I was in 6th grade and I was on my elementary school playground, and I was just shooting baskets with my dad, like on the asphalt concrete. You know, it was a hot day. I remember everything about that day. And the high school coach saw me shooting baskets with my dad, and he came over to me and he said, "You're going to try out for junior high sports, right?" And my dad, he's a basketball fanatic. He was
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, of course she is." You know, and we know who this man is. You know, he's the girls' coach at the high school team.
Yeah.
And it was at that point where someone spoke into my life, you know, and instantly said, "Okay, well, this is what I'm going to do."
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And for good or for worse, I'm not really sure. But it's those types of things when people speak into our lives, we have no idea the weight and the results
Right.
that's going to take in our life.
Right.
Right.
It shapes you.
It does.
It does.
It does.
And I think we may have talked about this earlier, but the average person lives, we'll just say 80, right? And 7th through 12th grade, 6 years of your life. I mean, that's less than 10% of your life.
Yeah.
Like we're talking maybe, I don't do the math perfectly, but maybe 8% of your life.
Yeah.
But think about how that 8% of your life affects.
Yeah,
It
for
shapes
sure.
all of it.
Right.
Yeah.
We've got 50-year-olds that are still struggling with things that I mean, you listen to professional athletes and they're 22, they're on top of the world, and they interview them and they say, well, back in junior high, they told me I wouldn't make it. And you're like, you're still back
Carrying that, yeah.
You're still back at 14 years old and
Right.
carrying that.
Yeah.
I mean, hey, great for you. It motivated you, but
Right.
but what about the 99% of the people who didn't make it?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And we're still carrying that
Absolutely.
8% of our life. It really does affect our adulthood.
Yeah.
But let me give you the counter to that, which is just within the last year, I gave my mom a gift. And I went and I found all of my old jerseys.
Is this the only gift you've ever given?
No.
Just kidding.
But the best,
Okay,
right?
okay,
So
the best
I
gift.
went and found all my old jerseys and from like Pee-wee through, I don't know, junior high probably, and put it all together and had a lady make a quilt out of it. And so all of those jerseys got put into a quilt. I gave it to her, and my mom could not tell you how many yards I passed for. She couldn't tell you what our records were. She didn't care. Like going back over those jerseys, what we think of when we see that is all the moments that you were describing earlier, which was just Gretchen running up and down the court. Those are the moments that you see when you look back over those jerseys, and you remember the people, and you remember all of the fun things. Not the stats, not the wins and losses, not, that team got you to this team, that none of those dots are connected. It's just the fun aspect of it. And so to me, it just reinforces the fact that those are the things that are important. I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
For sure. Tommy Jr., he was a baseball player and still coaches baseball right now. And then you've got Tanner, who played basketball, and then Taylor played soccer. Was there ever any tension that you and Gretchen faced regarding what your kids wanted to do as opposed to what you thought was best for them? Can you think of a situation or circumstance where that played out?
Well, so the levels that they played at and the sports they played happened naturally, right? So like all three kids, I got pictures of Taylor with her pink bat and her pink helmet and her pink shoes playing t-ball.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
With boys, and so, they, all of them played soccer, basketball, baseball. Taylor played the clarinet, Tommy played the French horn. Tommy and Tanner both were the kids that played football and wore their uniforms at halftime to play in the band. All of that. But as they got older, those things naturally are pruned away because Taylor played up to, 9th grade basketball. And then she was like, I'm just not as good as the other girls. Right. And so she moved on to soccer where she was excelling. And that's when once she made varsity, then we put her on a club team in the off season. And she, senior year was second team all district and blah, blah, blah. But, and Tanner was the same way. Tanner just didn't like baseball as much as Tommy. I coached him just like Tommy and whatever. And he went on and was bass fishing in college. He just graduated last month in December.
Yeah.
And we never thought you could even get a scholarship in bass fishing, but he did.
Yeah.
They actually, it's a club sport,
Wow.
but they actually gave him money for bass fishing at Dallas Baptist University. And we didn't see that coming really until around 9th and 10th grade when he joined the bass fishing club at Martin. So it naturally happened that it just began to prune away other things.
Yeah.
For Tommy, baseball was just something that he excelled at because, number one, he just wasn't that good in basketball. He played up to JV, right? And the varsity coach said, you're probably not going to play at the varsity team, right? And so it happened naturally for them just to become good at one thing. And then they were also passionate about that as well.
Yeah.
And so at that point, it became, okay, if we're going to do this, then we're going to do it We're going to work at it. We're going to do it hard. But I would go back again. One of the things that we really kept talking about, and even as I coach, I talk about, is that if you really want to help your team, if you really want to do that, then be a good teammate.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So even while they were sometimes playing, sometimes not playing, sometimes starting, sometimes not starting, even in college, let's talk about how do we be a good teammate, right? Because now Tommy played 2 years of NCAA Division II baseball, right?
Yeah.
And then he herniated a disc, had to have back surgery, and he was done.
Yeah.
Well, guess what he had left? A few memories and a lot of friendships.
Yeah.
Right. And those guys now, he's 5 years out of high school. They've all graduated, and guess what those guys have? They have friendships. Right. And they're not talking about necessarily stats. There may be a few stories.
Yeah.
But what they're talking about is relationships.
Right.
So some of that, I think, no, we did not force our kids one direction.
Yeah.
We allow some of that to happen naturally.
Yeah. That's great. I can think back to the time talking about as a parent when Cameron and Cole both said, "Yeah, I don't think I want to play anymore." And for me, it was like ripping my heart out, because what do you mean you don't want to play anymore? And my wife, who is, she's a great rudder for our family, no matter what it is. But, she's like, it's okay. Like, let them be. And now Cameron is an engineer and Cole's a pre-med. And you look at him and all I can think is how proud of him I am. And it's through the eyes of a father, not as a coach. And sometimes we have a hard time, I think, separating those two things. And, and I'll ask you, as a coach now, what do you say to parents when you see that they are just way too heavily invested in what their kids are, and maybe there's not a lot of talent there? How do you address that, or do you address that at all with the parents?
Well, it depends on the parent.
Yeah.
Right. Do they really want to talk, or they, and listen, or do they just want to tell me what they think? But I'll listen to what they have to say. But I think one of the piece of advice that I give the most is realize that this time is short. Right. So if I'm a high school coach and I'm talking to a high school parent, I'm like, just keep in mind, this time is short. These 2-3 years of high school, 4 years of high school go by really fast. And I promise you, if you make it all about the sport, if you make it all about this season, if you make it all about their accomplishments, you're going to regret it. Right.
Oh, yeah.
And I can say that.
The focus is on the sport.
I can, again, three kids right out of high school the last 4 or 5 years. I promise you, our relationship every year becomes less and less about their high school accomplishments.
Yes.
We would tell our kids, when you get out of high school, nobody cares.
Nobody cares. That's exactly right. Yeah.
My personal experience when I got to college as a freshman playing baseball, it was in the fall. Right. We'd had like a month of a fall season, didn't get to do a whole lot as freshmen. And they call all the freshmen in. There's about 8 of us. They call the freshmen in, and the head coach comes in. And, it's like, okay, are we going to get cut? What's going to happen? He's going to scream at us. He walks in. He says, okay, this won't take long, guys. How many of you played high school ball? Well, we all raised our hand, right? He said, how many of you were all district, all state, whatever, a bunch of them raised their hand. He says, how many of you, won, district or state or whatever? Several of them raised their hand. He said, well, guess what? We don't care anymore. So if I hear you talking about your high school accomplishments, if I hear you talking about it on the bus, in the locker room, on the field, then this is probably not the place for you.
Right.
And then he walked out. Like it was a 2-minute conversation. What was he saying? He was saying that, if you want to have those conversations when we're not working here as a team, that's great. But beyond that, nobody cares. And that kind of hurt my feelings, right? But he was right. Because a year later, when I'm a sophomore and we got freshmen coming in, guess what I hear them talking about? Oh, yeah, I was second team All-State. I was our starting. I made varsity as a freshman. And what are all the upperclassmen thinking?
Who cares?
That didn't do anything for our team.
Yeah. And you said it. You said the word team. We have a family friend who went to the Naval Academy, and it reminds me, those academies, they do the same thing. They get all of those kids in that class that have been recruited to go to the academy, and they sit them down in an auditorium and they say, okay, if you were top 5% of your class, stand up. and almost all of them
Sure.
stand up, and what it goes back to is that team word that you just said, because they have to get them to a place where they realize it ain't about you.
Mm-hmm.
It's about all of us, and you're not that different than everybody else. You're not any better than everybody else. And that's something that we have tried to hopefully instilled in our children is a dose of humility goes a long way.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully that plays out, because I see that, like you say, every Saturday you see parents just pushing and pushing and pushing these kids and yelling at them there's a difference between, hey, the ball's over here, you might want to look this way. And, just going so hard at these kids, and you can tell the difference, and it just breaks your heart, because there is so much more to life than what's going on there.
We're talking about focus, right?
Yeah.
So this past Saturday, I went to a funeral for one of my high school kids' dad. This kid's, he's at Cedar Hill High School now. He transferred last year. I coached him 2 years at Newman. His dad was incredible.
Yeah.
Ron Rodriguez. You can look up his obit in online. His dad loved baseball, loved his son. He was the guy that was out there, in the spring helping us with the field. He kept, books for us for home games. His wife, Julie, was one of the ones that brought, snacks even for high school boys after the game and cater or whatever. He had bypass surgery back in November and just never fully recovered from it, and then had complications a week and a half ago and passed away suddenly. This past Saturday at the funeral, spoke at his funeral and talking to his son George after the game. I promise you, what's on George's mind as a 17-year-old kid, right, is about the time that he spent with his dad.
Yeah.
Not about the wins and losses that he had in
right.
Elementary school.
Yeah.
And so, I told George, I used the word focus. I said, okay, because he's made the team at Cedar Hill High School. It's 6A school over there. They're getting ready to launch into their season. I said, okay, what are you focusing on, right?
Yeah.
He said, I'm going to focus on what my dad, wanted for me and the things he taught me, which are far bigger than the game of baseball.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we don't like to think like that.
Right.
That I might be doing all this with my kid now and not actually get to see him.
Yeah.
I promise you, it's. In fact, I said it in the funeral Saturday. Ron couldn't wait to see George play at the 6A level after he'd played at the 3A level the last 2 years. And that's going to be tough on their family.
Yeah.
So it just shows you how important it is that the time we do have with our kids, we focus on the right things.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm reading a book right now by John Mark Comer, and he talks about, not living for your resume, not, living in such a way that, you're adding to your resume, but actually living for your eulogy. Because it doesn't, it doesn't matter what is on your resume, when you're dead and gone. It's going to matter what the people say, at you, to you at your funeral type thing. And that just goes back to your character. And so when we think about focus, I think that that's just a perfect picture of, like sports were intended to be fun. They were intended to be a good thing, and there's a lot of good lessons in sports, but how quickly it can cross the line into controlling us, into controlling the time that we spend with our family, into controlling our finances and how much money we put into the sport. And then, just, controlling really just who we are and our identity. Like it comes down to an identity piece.
Yeah.
The money thing that you just said, I read an article probably about 6 months ago talking about how you have a generation of parents who are literally going in financial debt to chase their kids in these sports.
Yeah.
Tens of thousands of dollars is what the article said.
Yeah.
It was, and that, no, we didn't go in debt. With sports.
Yeah.
We also never did the go to Florida and play in a tournament, go to Alabama this weekend, but it's happening.
Yeah.
It's
prevalent. Absolutely. Yeah. And I'd like to make a point, which is I'm a failure. I was a failure as a child for, chasing this stuff because I didn't know any better. And I've been a failure as a parent because I've done kind of the same thing with my kids from time to time. And then I have to step back and go, what am I doing? And regain that focus. But the good news is it's not too late.
No.
Yeah.
You know,
Never too late.
it's not. And, you know, even as a 48-year-old man with my own dad, like, man, there's so much love that I have for my dad. Even going back, you know, when I felt like he was pushing me really hard, and he would say, like, I was trying to make you a better person. I was trying to make you, you know, better. And to a certain extent, that's right. But those things that happened during that time period, to your point, Tommy, they shape us. And we just have to remember, even when you recognize that you've made those mistakes, whether as a child or as a parent, it's never too late to go back and make things right. And I think that's partly why we're doing this podcast
For sure.
is to help us remember that.
Yeah, we see what we grew up in, and I know that I'm younger than you guys by just a couple of years.
Barely.
But you know, I've seen how culture has changed.
Yeah.
For sure. Going back to that asphalt when I was a 6th grader playing basketball. Previously, before that, I don't know that I ever attended a basketball game before that. So I honestly had no context of what actually was going on and how important that moment was.
Yeah.
So we talk about, obviously, you know, the time component of sports and how it can just kind of take over our lives. But let's shift a little bit and talk about playing time. So when we talk about focus, and maybe it's a refocus that happens, we're talking about like a playing perspective. So how do you respond when your kid isn't getting enough playing time? Or how do you respond as a parent when you don't think that they're in the right seat on the bus, if you will, or if they're not in the right role?
Yeah.
Tell me, have you dealt with that as a coach, as a parent before? Have you dealt with parents and their questions to you and what they thought and how that wasn't true? And what would you say in regards to that?
Well, I've sat in lots of parent meetings before sports started, right? You know, especially come 7th grade, because they would have a fall parent meeting or spring, you know, even into high school, whatever. And, you know the line. They'll tell you, number one, don't talk to me. Don't go approach the coaches right after the game. Number two, give it 48 hours and then think about what you're going to say before you say it, because it could have serious consequences, especially at the higher levels. And then number three, realize that if you're talking about and talking to the coach like this, it's going to impact, whether you like it or not, your child's perspective or perception of the coach. In other words, you could cause like damage to that coach-player relationship simply because you're criticizing them in front of your kid. And how many kids, don't respect their coach or don't know how to act around their coach because they listen to their parent criticize that coach on the way home from every game. And so
in 3rd grade, 4th grade, by the way, you know.
Or the refs.
Or the refs. Yeah.
So we didn't do that early on because, again, we were putting them in wasn't any reason to criticize the upward, coach,
Right.
Wasn't any reason to criticize Little League coaches or, different things like that. Taylor played on the same soccer team with the Arlington Soccer Association for 2 seasons per year for like 6 years. And it was just a couple, a married couple, and had twins. And they played together from like 6 years old, and both of them the twins played for Martin, graduated with Taylor. And I mean, those relationships, I can't imagine the friendship that we wouldn't have when we got to, be parents together as opposed to just a player and a coach or whatever, if we had criticized them. Instead, they gave Taylor like a graduation gift, and there was this great relationship. Again, what if, the funeral that I went to Saturday, what if the parent had chosen to criticize me instead of build a player-coach-parent relationship with me, right?
That's so
what a
good.
privilege to speak at his funeral and talk about the friend he was.
Right.
Not necessarily the parent of a player, but the friend that he was.
Right.
So there's an opportunity to build really special relationships. I have great relationships with many of my coaches, especially high school and college. what if we didn't have those relationships?
Right.
Because again, when you get out of the game, you don't care as much anymore.
Yeah.
You know.
Yep.
And you know, I think, well, I don't know how to put it into words right now, but there can be something really magical about your relationship with your kid's coach, or there could be something really destructive.
And you get to choose what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, you get to choose whether or not, to place trust in that space, or whether to place doubt and skepticism and, poor judgment and things like that.
Absolutely.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm sad because I made it through 6 weeks and now I'm going to be replaced with Tommy
No,
on this podcast.
No.
That is such great insight. I just, man, you're in the right place, obviously, for what you do. And you bring the point up. It's such concentric circles, with the relationships that you make along the way. And that's what I carry away. I've made this point before in the podcast where what I carry away either from athletics or police work or any chapter of my life is the people and the relationships you make. And that's what sports are great for that. I mean, you really forge your character, but you forge relationships in those moments, and they carry with you a lifetime. And fortunately, we have people like you who are still in the trenches with these kids that are showing those examples. And man, it occurs to me that we just need more of that.
Yeah. Yeah. To sum it up, are you focused on the relationships that you have with others, or are you focused on solely your kids' advancement? I don't know.
Right.
I think that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, we, are we becoming our kid's publicist? Right? Mm-hmm. Our job is to promote our kid.
Yeah.
And so when my kid goes and plays, if the coach is not promoting my kid to that level, right? Like an author has a publicist who goes and pushes and promotes them, right?
Yeah.
Is your kid's game a book signing every week?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
The whole recruiting
Or
process.
a highlight, film.
Highlight reel.
Yeah.
Film.
Yeah.
And so then one day your kid, the highlight of their life was back when you gave them all that positive attention, right? And now they're young adults, and you don't give that same positive attention anymore.
Right.
And I'm not sure what happened. I will tell you this one little story. So again, playing at Duff Elementary, we were the Duff Mustangs. They still have that today. Optimus football.
Yeah.
My coaches were Dr. Tarkington. I just forgot the other coach. But I didn't know they were doctors as a kid. Right? They were 3 doctors in town. They've all retired.
Yeah.
And their sons, right, were friends of mine. I didn't know they were doctors. But in 6th grade, we won the 6th grade championship, played Hill Highlanders, won the game, whatever.
Yeah.
And they're still the Hill Highlanders.
They're still the Hill Highlanders.
Man.
Yeah. Yeah. 10 years later, they had an anniversary where they invited all the players back because we went from, we were like, 11, 12, and now we were like 21, 22.
Yeah.
And they had I threw a 10-year anniversary 6th grade championship at Dr. Tarkington's house.
Yeah.
And the players we were all invited. They did a great job of getting a hold of us.
Yeah.
Came back, and I think everybody on the team, I think there was like 22 players on the team back then.
Yeah.
This is like 1983. When we won that. And almost all the players came back.
That's cool.
And they took a picture with us, and we talked whatever. But the key to all of that was the relationship between the parents and the coaches and the players.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because the parents came to it. It was out in their backyard. It was just an incredible time.
Yeah.
And still friends with those guys today.
Right.
About a month ago, I was out at a high school buddy of mine that was also, in that elementary team. He owns some land out in East Texas, and he had texted me and said, "Hey, has your boys shot their first buck?" And I was like, they haven't. They hadn't had a chance to shoot their first buck. He said, "Come on out." And me and Tommy and Tanner spent a couple of days hunting out there in December.
Yeah.
Right? That's a whole nother story, by the way. And so that relationship, again, goes back to elementary days, right, of sports.
Yeah.
He played for the Atlanta Braves, was in the Army after he hurt his arm.
Yeah.
And if you look up Cody Robertson now, he's head of Army Bass Anglers and has an incredible ministry.
Wow.
Incredible ministry. And he's on all over the internet.
Yeah.
But that goes back to when we talk, we don't talk about how great he was at the Atlanta Braves. We talk about winning the 6th grade championship together, but more importantly, just being friends.
Right.
So it's almost like you want to fast forward 20 years right now as a parent and go, okay, what will be important to me and my family, my kids 20 years from now or 10 years from now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. What is the best? What is the best for my kid 20 years from now? Yeah, that's good. Well, Tommy, thanks. This has been really good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks for letting me come.
Yeah. When I think about someone who has won it with his home team, yeah, you're one of those guys for
100%.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're such a cheerleader for our families here at church. So I appreciate it for sure.
Thanks.
All right. That's maybe the best episode yet. I say that every week.
I think so too. Yep. All right, guys. Well, thanks for listening in or watching, whichever one that you're doing. If you haven't followed us yet, go ahead and follow us or subscribe. We would love to kind of keep you guys in the know. So
absolutely.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
Have a great week.